how do you, Twitter's a good example, because you're very active on Twitter. I don't know if you're as active as I am on Twitter, but we have it's a close battle. And I think our style of interaction on Twitter is analogous. So I have a couple of questions for you there. It's like, how do you protect yourself against using your, what would you say, your charismatic forthrightness? That's a good way of thinking about it. How do you protect yourself against using that egotistically and for instrumental gain? I mean, you have a wife that pokes fun at you, and that's helpful, and how do you know you're doing that? And how do you know when you're poking and prodding to be authentic, that you're not, you're not mouthing off and going too far and showing off and engaging in an ego display on that front? How do you think you always keep yourself in check, and how do you do it if you do it successfully?
That's an amazing question, because I've struggled with that conundrum when two important values within me conflict with one another. So let me give you an example. I may have a good friend who's spouting nonsense on Twitter, okay? And because of my values, maybe my Middle Eastern values, you don't go after a friend. So I'll hold my tongue for a while. But then there's that voice in my head that says, but wait a minute, if you hold your voice and don't correct that person, if you think that they are uttering gibberish, then you're being inauthentic. That's exactly what happened. Not that I wish to bring him back to the forefront, but that's what happened between Sam Harris and me, because we were on very friendly terms. We got along very, very well. We've gone out to dinner. I'd been on his show. And for about 4 or 5 years, I kept completely quiet about his, Trump hysteria, because I felt that I owed him, because I knew him, I had to have kind of a higher standard of restraint. But then at one point, I felt that my being restraining in my interactions with him, I was being inauthentic to the truth, and therefore I went after him, and I thought was a playful way, but he didn't take well to it, and regrettably, I presume that we're no longer friends now, which is a real shame. And so I struggle with that exact issue. But I think the fact that I struggle with it is itself a form of ultimate humility, right? Because if I didn't struggle with it, if I was always self-assured in everything that I did without having the back voice in my head telling me, are you doing the right thing? Then I would never engage in these autocorrective behaviors. So I don't have a definitive answer. I do struggle with that issue. Is it always best to tell the truth, or should you hold your tongue once in a while? It's a tough one to navigate.
Mm-hmm. Well, how much of a role do you think the social connections that you have play in helping regulate your behavior? Like, you have a good relationship with your wife. Like, are the people in your family, the people that you're close to, are they keeping an eye on you and giving you a whack when they think that you've stepped out of line?
Well, certainly my wife is very good at doing that, because in her case, she sees the fact that I might get angry at some insane thing that's being said on Twitter. And then she'll kind of come in, because she'll see me like having, kind of shaking my head on my laptop. She says, okay, what are you upset at now? Who said what? And then she'll try to kind of come in and say, why don't we go out for a walk? Or why don't we play with our children? And so that's another thing that makes choosing the right spouse so important, because they recognize your behavioral traps. They recognize where you might falter, and they make you a better person. And I hope I also offer that to her. And so
right.
Turns out to be a beautiful symbiotic relationship.
Yeah,
and I see from how you interact with your wife, you share a similar love of your wife.
Yeah, and I think we used to play together as kids, eh? Like, we were childhood friends. And
that's true.
Yeah. And what's really been interesting, Gad, and this is really a form of miracle as far as I'm concerned, and I think it's because both of us passed so close to death in the last few years. I mean, Tammy almost died every day for about 8 months. It was really quite awful. And I was out of commission for 2.5 years. When we came back together, we were pretty alienated from one another, because I really hadn't been around for 2 years, and she had been recovering from her terrible illness, and to some degree in isolation. And, our pathways had diverged to some degree. And I was still quite sick when I came back home, and what saved us was the habit of play that we had established over decades, and we came together again in the field of play. And that reunited us very quickly. And the thing that's been so miraculous about this, and it really has been a staggering revelation to me, is that that spirit of play has magnified itself now to such a degree that when I'm with her and we're in a playful mood, I can see her across, in some ways, I can perceive her across the whole span of the time that we spent together, right from, 1969 to now. And it's like I'm playing with that person that I've always known, and that's actually deepened as we've got to know each other over the decades. That's got more and more profound and also more and more like a return to the state of mind that we had when we were young kids, 8 years old, playing together as friends. And that's really, it's an amazing thing. It's certainly one of the best things that's ever happened to me in my whole life.